Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for choosing Across the Fence. I'm Will Michael in for Fran Stoddard. You don't need to be a professional dairy farmer to know at least a little bit about the volatility of the dairy business. News reports frequently track the up and down prices that farmers get paid for their milk, and we learn about the costs, the feed, the fuel, the fertilizer that are all necessary to produce the milk. Staying in dairy farming often means diversifying the income stream. A farm might add a maple sugaring operation, offer agritourism opportunities, or produce a value-added product. Those dairy businesses also need support to develop, market, and distribute the quality products they produce. And that's where the Northeast Dairy Business Innovation Center comes in. The center was established as part of the 2018 Federal Farm Bill. Its focus, a specific focus on regional dairy, the USDA selected 4 sites across the country to serve as regional hosts. The Dairy Business Innovation Center, or DBIC, covers 11 states in the Northeast, and it's hosted by the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Food, and Markets. So joining us from the agency this afternoon is Laura Ginsberg. Laura is the leader of the Northeast DBIC. Good afternoon, Laura. Thank you very much for taking the time to be with us.
Thanks for having me.
So very simply, to get us started, what is the Northeast Dairy Business Innovation Center?
Sure. As you noted, we are one of the 4 national centers funded by the USDA, and we represent the 11 states of the Northeast. So from Pennsylvania and Maryland in the south to Maine in the north. And we provide grant funding, technical assistance, and opportunities for the dairy supply chain from farmers to processors and distributors to improve their business or access technical assistance or reach new markets.
So Laura, how do you do that? What's the DBIC doing to provide the types of benefits to the farm businesses that you mentioned and to help our overall economy? How are you doing that?
Sure. We're required by USDA to put at least 50% of our funds out as grants to dairy businesses, which would be farmers or processors or producer associations like the Vermont Cheese Council. We really value the opportunity of having so much money. We've been granted about $38.7 million to date, and really put most of our funds out as grants so that those businesses can do improvements that will set up our regional dairy sector for the long term. We also provide contracts for technical assistance providers to do specific opportunities for farmers or processors. And then if we have questions that will help us generate better funding opportunities, we will do research with contractors or subject matter experts. We did one last year on improving distribution in the region and figuring out ways to better move Vermont and New England products into the major metro markets of the Northeast and down to Washington, D.C. and farther south. So then we take those answers and we try to develop grant programs to help the people that are most impacted by distribution.
So Laura, I'm going to go back to something that I did hear you say. You talked about $38 million that you have available to distribute. I actually understand that some of that is into the future, right? It's already sort of out to 2026 maybe? Am I correct about that?
That's correct. We have through 2026 to spend the funds that we have received. Okay. So we are getting our last appropriation this year because it is a Farm Bill program. So the program was authorized in 2018. This is the last allocation of funds. And then depending on the outcomes of the next Farm Bill that's being discussed right now, we may or may not remain a center.
But if I take that, the money that has been allocated, you've put significant, in excess of $18 million through these grant programs to our farmers, to our producers. Is that correct?
That's correct. We have over 200 grants in progress, so underway, totaling about $6 or $7 million. And then we have additional grant programs out right now that have not yet been awarded. So we have $12 million out for processing expansion, $1 million for processor innovation, and we just awarded about $1 million in farm innovation. So put together, that's another $14 million that's going to be going out the door.
I have a question for you in just a moment about those innovation grants. That seems very exciting. But are you working with farmers who are looking to expand on something that already exists? Or is this about starting something new? Or maybe it's both?
Sometimes it's both. So we really strive to meet farmers where they're at and provide them with the opportunities to meet their goals. So sometimes that means, sometimes we think about innovation as being robotics, but sometimes innovation is growing a new type of feed for that farm or that area of the region. So we really look at dairy as very varied, I guess you could
Mm.
say. So, right. So, like, there's big farms, there's small farms, there's grass-based farms, there's seasonal dairies, there's goat and sheep dairies. And we want to have an opportunity for everybody, no matter what they're doing and what they're producing and what kind of animal they're milking or the market that they're serving. So, we take a big tent approach. Some of our opportunities are more suitable for larger farms, and some are geared specifically to goat and sheep dairy. But there is something for everybody who's engaged in the dairy sector.
I'm just going to comment that in preparing for the program, one of the examples I found was reducing plastic. In other words, through helping with processing and some of the packaging, you found ways to reduce the environmental impact of the use of plastics, as an example.
Exactly. Right. So, one of the things that we are really focused on with these funds is ensuring that the Northeast regional dairy market is as competitive as it can be because we don't compete on cost of production. We don't have the really big farms and really big processors like they do in Idaho and California. And so, one of the things we want to do is really understand consumer demand for packaging and different types of specialty products because that's where we will have the returns that will keep our farming sector vibrant. And so we put out a grant last year, and actually we're about to reopen it in a couple of months for packaging innovation. And our first run really focused on the reduction of using virgin plastic in dairy packaging. So that's the plastic film that wraps your blocks of cheese. That's the plastic containers that your product comes in. We have a grant with Stonyfield to reduce the amount of packaging actually in their pouches, their yogurt pouches, which are super popular with kids and families. And then another grant with a goat caramel producer, a Big Picture Farm here in Vermont, that's doing sort of a whole packaging life cycle analysis for their caramels. So that is one way that we are able to say we see this demand out here on the consumer side. We know export markets are going to need different types of plastic packaging than what we use, and we want to be in front of that.
You mentioned the the innovation grants a moment ago, and that's one of the most recent rounds of grants you said that you've passed on. So, what types of innovation are you seeing, or are you funding in Vermont and Northeast Dairy?
That's right. This is our first time offering innovation rounds. So a lot of times our grant programs are very specific. So we'll say these types of projects are eligible, or you have to focus on this type of thing. But the innovation grants were an opportunity for us to hear like what is exciting out on the ground on farms or in processing companies. What are they thinking about? What are they working towards? And to really provide the funding and the time and space to do the research and development that's needed to develop new ideas or new methods. So in the farm innovation round, we saw a lot of farmers applying for new types of equipment, both field equipment or milk house equipment, maybe some robotics or some additional use of technologies. We have some exciting work happening with what's called virtual fencing, which is where the animals will wear collars that tell them where the fence line is. So very similar to like a when you have invisible fence for a dog, maybe, but it allows the farmer to have sort of maximum control over where their cows are going. And that's a really new technology to the US and definitely to the Northeast region. On the processor innovation side of things, we saw some projects that are focusing on new types of food products, new types of packaging, and new ways to market and distribute the products that are made here. So those haven't been reviewed yet. So we don't know what we're going to fund out of them, but we did receive, I think, about 3 or 4 times the request in each round. Then we have funds available, which is pretty typical for us.
Well, nice to know it addresses the fact that there is a need out there, and the fact that it's competitive from a taxpayer's point of view is a very good thing. How would someone apply for the grants, this conversation we're having? How do they get on the ground floor, and where do they go? What do they do?
Right, so everything that we do is web-based. We have a newsletter and a website that it explains all of the granting programs. We alert people ahead of time when grants are going to open up so that they can start planning. We have a whole calendar for the rest of the year about what's going to be coming up. And we encourage people to reach out to us if they do have questions, because sometimes a grant program, if they have one particular project in mind, we want to make sure they're applying to the program that is the best fit for their project, and not wasting their time, putting in an application in a round where their project wouldn't really be a good fit. And then the application's online, and then we score them and provide feedback. So if somebody's not funded, which when we get, in one case, we got 178 applications and we are only able to fund 25. We give people feedback, and that way they can come back with a stronger application. So we're always happy to talk about people's applications. If they weren't funded, to provide them with feedback about how to strengthen it and what to do with the reviewer feedback. And we want to make sure that people also don't get discouraged. So taking that opportunity to connect them with technical assistance or grant writing assistance if needed, to make sure that they are putting in a really competitive application, is something that we're also happy to do.
And Laura, with that, I must say that we are out of time. I want to thank you for joining us. And I just want to make one last note for our director, Adam Wright, who very nicely put up the graphic of where you could find it. And there it is one more time before we go. The basic information at agriculture.vermont.gov/DBIC. Laura Ginsberg from the Agency of Agriculture and the Northeast Dairy Business Innovation Center, thank you very much for being with us.
Thanks so much for having me.
And that is our program for today. We know you have choices, so thanks for choosing us. I'm Will Michael, inviting you to join us back here each weekday afternoon for another visit across the fence.